Okay, so we left off with looking at this last time about the distribution of IQ scores, and so this should look familiar to you. We're looking at, again, the average IQ score is 100, and about 50% of scores fall within that broad average range. I don't love this word, the idea of mental retardation. Now we look for more the idea of mentally challenged or mentally disabled. But this was copyrighted in 2000 by the APA, and so that's kind of the chart that's in your book and that we also use right now. So you can kind of see the idea of mild, moderate, severe, and then profound, and you can see the degrees of mental retardation and then what those adaptation to demands of life are. So for example, with mild, they may learn academic skills up to about the 6th grade level. Adults may, with assistance, achieve self-supporting social, vocational skills. And then when you get to the profound level, which is anybody that has an IQ below 20, you're talking about they constant aid supervision. So then you have a whole range of that in between as well. Causes, many times causes unknown. There's organic retardation, results from like genetic problems, brain damage. There's also chromosomal factors such as like Down syndrome. Cultural familia results from a greatly impoverished environment, injury before, during, and then after birth. What happens in the womb can also influence that growth process. Poisonous substances, things like lead, carbon monoxide, malnutrition, disease such as measles, theory about autism, which has mostly been disproven at this point, and we've talked about that a little bit in this class, vaccinations around 18 months. So then on the other side, superior intelligence, moderately gifted, usually defined by an IQ score of between 130 and 150. Profoundly gifted is usually defined by an IQ score around 180 or above. People who are prodigies display a mastery in a particular area at a young age that are normal in other areas. So for example, they rarely excel in more than one area, so they're really good at whatever they're good at. So for example, Galileo was really good at math and invented the pendulum at age 17. Mozart played the piano at age 3 and then composed at age 4. So usually they are very focused in on what they are good at. And then you have savants who are gifted in one area but mentally challenged in all others. So kind of interesting aspects of savants there. And again, I think I used the example in one of the earlier videos, but if you've ever seen the movie Rain Man, and I'll show you some clips in class, but that's the idea of a savant, where they may be very, very gifted in one thing but mentally challenged in other areas. Characteristics of the gifted. Again, Lewis Terman studied the gifted. He had a group called the Terman Termites. He studied 1,528 superior individuals in California. There were questions about whether this study was kind of flawed or not, and so I want you to think about what reasons could that study be flawed. Findings is that they typically read before they entered school. 3/4 in the 8th grade score on achievement test equal to 12th graders. They were leaders in the school. They tended to be not as self-centered as other students. They were interested in the problems of society, and they developed early career plans. Intelligence, is it nature or is it nurture? Again, we come to those ideas of twin studies with identical and fraternal twins, especially twins that are raised apart. So is it, and then when you look at adoption studies, more like biological parents, or are they more like the adoptive parents? And so you can see over here on the right hand side the idea of shared genes. So is intelligence nature or is it nurture? You could probably argue either way. Interaction, one of the factors when you're talking about whether it's nature or nurture is it inherited. A number that indicates the amount or proportion of some ability, characteristic, or trait that can be attributed to genetic factors such as nature. Or reaction range, which would be your environmental factors, indicates the extent to which traits, abilities, or IQ scores may increase or decrease as a result of interaction with environmental factors. So keep in mind, again, that discussion of nature and nurture that we continuously come back to in AP Psych about, is intelligence something that is genetic or is it environmental? You can see here some charts, some graphs, again, the idea of whether it's nature versus nurture. Intelligence, general abilities typically split 50-50. Spatial abilities, though, 68% when it comes to nurture. Verbal ability, 55-45 split, and memory, 55-45 split. So, I think you could pick a side and argue that debate that we had on the first or second day of school. It could be applied to intelligence. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Group differences in intelligence test scores. The bell curve is different for whites versus blacks, for minorities. Math scores are different across genders, and the highest scores are actually in Asian males. Why? What kind of possible reasons could you have for those differences in test scores? We're going to look at that in class. We're going to read an article called The Bell Curve to look at what accounts for these differences. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Because you're talking about 15 points, which is fairly large when you're talking about IQ scores. One of the things that they question is test bias, which is that tests do discriminate, but some argue that their sole purpose is to discriminate, that we have to look at the type of discrimination, that tests to some extent are culturally biased. It's something that you constantly look at in these standardized tests and IQ tests. What are the biases? So we'll look at some of those as well. That's it for this one. This is pretty short. So if you have any questions, let me know.